Absolutely hilarious because some of the rap is pretty good. And hop, 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 and pound, you know, the horse in the house and you take off and you see this young person. And the other adults.
We're going to be getting started in just a couple of minutes. We're going to give a little bit more time for some more people to show up. Thank you for your patience.
Circus Parade.
Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm glad that you're able to come on a very nice day. And this is a perfect weather for a circus parade. I think that's one thing that we can agree on. Oh, hi, Linda. First of all, welcome to the Milwaukee Public Library. I'm Dan Lee. I work in the humanities room, and my coworker, Jen, right behind me, is Jen Paul. She's our digital projects librarian, and she has digitized materials from our various special collections to create the Great Circus Parade digital collection. We have program evaluation forms that we ask everyone to fill out, and we also have handouts. And the books and the one DVD we have up here, you're welcome to borrow them. These are circulating copies. And these are the books by Chappie Fox because the covers have been so well worn over the decades that we had to replace them with library binding covers. And we're going to start off with the mayoral proclamation that was issued by Mayor Cavalier Johnson.
Okay, from the Office of the Mayor, City of Milwaukee, proclamation. Whereas the City of Milwaukee joins friends, family, and community members in recognizing the 60th anniversary of the Circus Parade on Saturday, July 29th, 2023. And whereas the Circus Parade was founded by Chappie Cox and Ben Barkin, sponsored by the Joseph Schlitz Brewing Company, and was first held in Milwaukee in 1963. And whereas the Circus Parade featured circus wagons and animals from the Circus World Museum in Baraboo, Wisconsin, and marching bands from around the United States, it recreated how circuses used parades to attract people to visit touring circus shows in the late 19th century and early 20th century. Whereas the Circus Parade was held 30 times between 1963 and 2009 in Milwaukee, typically drew hundreds of thousands of attendees and was televised nationally on NET PBS. And whereas the City of Milwaukee congratulates the Milwaukee Public Library for the new Great Circus Parade digital collection and a program and display celebrating great memories of the Great Circus Parade. And now, therefore, I, Cavalier Johnson, Mayor of the City of Milwaukee, do hereby proclaim Saturday, July 29th, 2023 to be Circus Parade Memory Days throughout the City of Milwaukee. Signed by Cavalier Johnson, Mayor.
Thanks, Jen, for reading Mayor Johnson's mayoral proclamation. And we're here to talk about some great memories and also about the materials that we have in our collection. And first, we're going to start off with a brief history of the Circus Parade. And then Jen will talk about creating the digital collection and the materials that we have in them. And after that, we will have a Q&A session. And depending on how much time we have left, if there's very little time, we'll go straight down the hallway so that you can see the materials that we have on display. And if we have a lot of time, we can even show a quote from the National Archives website of the promotional film that was commissioned by Schlitz Brewing and produced by Ben Barton's PR firm and Don Kiesler Productions that aired on Channel 4 in January 1964 and actually played at the Greendale Movie Theater. As many of you know, circus parades were used by circuses as they traveled around the country to promote their traveling circus shows and to bring people to them. And the peak of that period was from the 1880s to about the 1920s. And it largely faded away during the Great Depression. And now, I believe that most, and maybe all of us, believe that the first revival of the Circus Parade was 60 years ago on the 4th of July, 1963. But does anyone remember a Circus Parade 5 years earlier in 1958 in Milwaukee? This is something that I just stumbled upon last week. Next slide, please. This is the Milwaukee Journal's picture page from July 15th, 1958. If you look in the top left corner, there's a little boy who's, waiting for the parade to come by. And in the top right-hand corner is a colored photo that was taken of the parade that was held on July 14th at noon. And you can see that it's going past Gimbals and is crossing the Wisconsin Avenue Bridge. It's hard to believe that 150,000 people attended this Monday parade and nobody seems to remember it. And when I did a Google search for the 1958 Milwaukee Circus Parade, I couldn't find anything about it. It's kind of hard to believe that even 5 years later, when everybody was, was getting into the Schlitz Circus Parade, people just actually forgot about the 1958 parade. But this parade was actually a common tactic that was used by the Christiani Brothers Circus as they traveled around the country. Their circus was at the state fair for a couple of days, and then they were looking for a sponsor, and the Milwaukee Junior Chamber of Commerce decided to sponsor it. Its past president, maybe a name that you remember, Rod Lancer. Does that ring a bell with some of you? Linda, I saw your hand go up a little bit. Do you remember? Exactly. Well, Rod Lancer was a past president of the Junior Chamber of Commerce. He ran and lost for Alderman in 1960, and then he was elected in 1956 he ran and lost, and then he was elected Alderman in 1960, and later on he became Summerfest director, immediately preceding a more famous name, Bull Black. And then he finished his political career when he was elected county clerk. He was the parade marshal. And guess who was the honorary parade marshal?
Chappie Fox.
Yep, Chappie Fox. Next slide, please. Well, this isn't quite a Chappie Fox, but as you can see, the Circus Parade had several names. Today, we remember it as the Great Circus Parade, but originally, its first official name was A Day in Old Milwaukee. That was its name from 1963 to 1967. But most of us who went to the parade when we were kids in the 1960s and 70s remember it as the Schlitz Circus Parade. And then the name was officially changed to Old Milwaukee Days from 1968 to 1973. And as you remember, it wasn't just simply the parade that the circus came into town. It was held on the lakefront for a few days preceding, sometimes after the parade, so that it was an event for several days. And when it was revived in 1985, that's when the name was changed to the Great Circus Parade that we remember the parade as. The next slide, please. Here's a photo of Chappie Fox with then Mayor John Norquist taken in 1989. And this comes from the John Norquist mayoral records, which were just processed last year. And if we look at the next slide, this is Chappie Fox from the 1932 Riverside High School Mercury Yearbook. And his nickname at this point wasn't yet Chappie, it was Charlie. And one of the reasons why we included this is that we found out that there's a bit of a connection between Chappie Fox and this building. Now, as you know, there was something else going on during the 1930s, the Great Depression. And when he graduated from Riverside, he couldn't find a job, but he was always interested in wildlife and photography. So he approached another familiar Milwaukee name, Owen Browning, at the Milwaukee Public Museum. Now, we remember Owen Browning as a wildlife painter, but for 40 years, Owen Browning worked at the Public Museum in this building as a taxidermist and curator. So Fox approached Browning about you know, for a job. But Ronnie pointed out that due to depression, the museum's budget and the other city departments' budgets were being cut, that the only work they had was unpaid work. So he worked here for a year in the taxidermy studio on the 4th floor of this building. He worked with modeling clays, sweeping up, and whatever other odd chores there were. And he and Owen Browning kept in touch, for the rest of their lives. And Chappie actually helped Ronnie with some of his books on birds and wildlife and his paintings. And then, fortunately, a year later, in 1933, he did find a job. He worked for Prime Manufacturing in Milwaukee for 26 years until 1959. But that was his vocation, but his avocation was photography. And he had his photos published in the journal. And then he developed an interest in circuses. And during the 1940s and 50s, he wrote, a few books on circuses and circus parades that we have here. And then when he retired from Prime Manufacturing, the Circus World Museum was created, and he became its first director in 1960. Now, since he served as an honorary parade marshal, he saw that circus parade was doable, and he was actually thinking about recreating the circus parade in Baraboo as a way to promote the brand new Circus World Museum. And what he wanted was $20,000 to stage a parade in Baraboo. And he went to a dozen companies in Wisconsin for sponsorship, and they all turned him down. And finally, he approached Ben Barton. And Ben Barton says, I have a client that may be interested in this. And Barton's firm, Barton, Berman, and Associates, had a client, which was a major Milwaukee business, Schlitz Brewing. So Barton and Fox approached Robert Bob Eli Jr. And Eli was enthusiastic about it. His big thing were horses. As you remember, there was the Eli Polo Field at 60th and Good Hope, right across the street from the Redwood Country Club. And he agreed to finance it. And it cost about $300,000 to put on the initial 1963 parade. And by later parade standards, it was considered to be sort of like a half parade because the Circus World collection was growing by leaps and bounds over the years and decades. So in 1963, we had actually the second Circus Parade revival since 1918. That was the last time a circus parade was held in Milwaukee for a traveling circus show. And as the parade grew, what was introduced in 1965 was the circus train. For the first couple of years, the circus parade was actually hauled from Baraboo by a truck. But as you know, how many of you seen the PBS series, The Circus, that aired on the American Experience about 5 years ago? It was a Ken Burns series. And circuses used to travel by trains. And so in 65, Chappie, Fox, and Ben Barton and Schlitz, they approached the Chicago Northwestern Railway, and they had a charter train to bring the parade here by train. So that was the first circus parade train. Now let's go on to the next slide. And here's Ben Barton with Archbishop William Cousins and Mayor Henry Meyer. And this was taken in 1968 by the Milwaukee Journal, and this is part of the historic portrait collection. This is the photo that we have of Ben Barton. Now you can see that, Myers smiling. And however, they were on the opposite side of the fence 16 years later. Next slide, please. As you remember, Schlitz stopped sponsoring the Circus Parade after 1973. And there were several reasons why that happened. One was that Chappie Fox left Baraboo and the Circus World Museum in 1972. And Barton, felt that there wasn't a reliable partner that could carry on the work that Chappie Fox did. And plus, Schlitz was concerned about the rise in fuel costs, right? Because this was the time of the OPEC oil embargo. And initially, Schlitz said that they would not sponsor the parade for 1974, but would hope to bring it back in 1975. But unfortunately, as the 1973-74 recession worsened, Schlitz unfortunately decided to pull the plug on it because of the bad state of the economy at that time. And then Schlitz beer market share just cratered in the mid to late 70s. And looking at the Schlitz annual reports that we have in our historic business annual report collection, I was surprised by how steep Schlitz declined. I figured that maybe they've lost about a quarter, of their sales, but they lost almost half of their beer sales in 4 years, from 24 million barrels in 1976 down to 14 million in 1980. I mean, talk about a crash. And then we know what eventually happened, that they were bought out by Stroh's, and now, Schlitz's history. And what happened after that? The city of Chicago approached the Circus World Museum and asked them about the Circus Parade. And this is something that I don't remember, but Chicago and the Circus World Museum had the parade in Chicago for 2 years, in 1981 and 1982. And in 1983, the Milwaukee Press Club awarded Ben Barton an award at their annual gridiron team. And when Barton accepted it, he said, "It's time to bring the Circus Parade back to Milwaukee." So fortunately for him, Chappie Fox was back. He retired from Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey, and he got tired of Florida. He said, there are just too many big bugs down there. So he decided to retire and come back to Baraboo. And so he assisted Barton, but he was no longer the main planner. And Barton went out and started soliciting money for the parade. And however, he ran into one roadblock. The county council approved the permit unanimously. But Henry Meyer vetoed the permit. Now, why did he veto it? Anybody remember? Does anybody remember another annual parade that was happening in Milwaukee during the summer in the 1980s? Who said City of Festivals? Bingo. That started in 1983, and that was Meyer's baby, because he saw the City of Festivals Parade as a vehicle to promote Summerfest and all ethnic festivals, at the Summerfest Bowls. And he was afraid that the Circus Parade would undercut the City of Festivals Parade. And he was actually right. Because the City of Festivals Parade was usually held in June at the start of all the summer festivals. And he vetoed it, but the Common Council unanimously overrode his veto. And you can see Bill Sanders' editorial cartoon from the November 28, 1984 edition of the Journal. There's Meyer throwing a little veto tantrum, and everybody is a little ticked off. Now, you have to remember 1984 that the Common Council had a wide variety of aldermen with different viewpoints. It's not too often that you would have aldermen as disparate as Bob Anderson from the 13th district on the far south side, and Michael McGee represented the 10th district on the north side. And you remember that Michael McGee tried to recreate the Black Panther militia movement in Milwaukee, but they both voted to give the Circus Parade a permit, and they both voted to override Mayor Meyer's veto. Now that says something about how popular the Circus Parade was. So there were two parades that were held in 1985, and Henry Meyer rode in the parade, and guess what happened to him? He was booed for the entire route. And his words were right. 775,000 people ride the 3-mile route of the Circus Parade. It outdrew the City of Festivals Parade that was held 3 weeks earlier by more than 300,000 people. And shortly after Meyer left office, the City of Festivals Parade ended shortly afterwards in 1993. But the Circus Parade just kept chugging along. And both, Barkin and Fox were getting up there in years. And Barkin's last appearance at the parade was in 2021. And he was actually transported there by a hospital ambulance. And I actually remember watching this on TV, that he was actually in a gurney at a stand in front of the old federal building. And then he died a year later. Chappie Fox made his last appearance at the Circus Parade in 2003, and he was in a wheelchair at the review stand. And then he died later in the year, and that was the end of the Circus Parade being an annual event. But his nephew, Bill Fox, and former Schlitz executive, Jack McKeithen, brought it back for its swan song in 2009. So that is the brief history of the Circus Parade, and now Jen will talk about the Circus Parade digital collection.
Hello, I'm Jen. I'm the digital projects librarian, and my job is to find special collections from the library, digitize them, put them online so people have better access to them. We learned during the pandemic that, the building's not always going to be open. Things aren't always going to be accessible. So a library, one of our first jobs is making things available to people. And so it kind of just drove home the point that now more than ever, it's important to put things online. So I was looking for a project, and I think Dan reminded me that this year was the 60th anniversary of the first Circus Parade. And so I started looking around and seeing what the library had in its collection. And so we have several different collections that feature memorabilia from the Circus Parade. So a couple of them are in local history manuscript, a couple of them are historic photos, there's some posters, just from all over the place. So what I thought I would do is I would pull all those things together in one easy to access spot. and create a collection. So if you want to go to our website, I will show you how you can access it. Okay, so our webpage is mpl.org. If you click on the right-hand side in that green area under research, once the computer starts to behave, you'll see MPL Digital Library on the right. Click on that. And you'll see a whole big list of all of our different collections, and you can look at those at your leisure. But Great Circus Parade is the name of the collection. And so once you click into that, you'll get a chance to look at some of the great things that I found. So the 1963 parade order and wagon description was amazing. This document has a list of every single wagon that was pulled in the parade. It tells you the colors, it tells you the history of the wagon, where it came from, the different circuses that had it, and what they used it for. There are lists of all the different bands that marched, the colors of their uniforms. So this was actually really useful to me when I got later on into the collection, the historic photos, and was looking at some of these photos. I was actually able to tell, what the bands were, what year it came from. We had some slides that we thought were from 63, but they featured the hippo cage being pulled, and learned from another source in this document or in this collection that actually, the first time the hippo cage was pulled was 64. So, aha, light bulb moment. So, if for someone who's a fan of history, who's a fan of research, these materials are just really invaluable. And now you're able to look at them at your leisure from home. If you still want to see the actual physical thing, you can come in, make an appointment, and look at that too. But yeah, and there's also, in addition to text documents, there's photographs, there's slides from all different years. We've got pictures of Ernest Borgnine in there when he was a circus clown. So yeah. That's just some of the stuff. Does anybody have any questions about the collection? A lot of our photos in the historic photo collection were donated to us. So there are some professional photographer journal photos, but a lot of it is just from people like you who went to see the parade and took pictures. And so, we have them from all different years. My uncle who lived in Chicago actually came to the 66 Circus Parade, and he donated those photos to me. And so some of those wound up in the digital collection, not all of them, because not all of them were frankly great photos, but they're all in the physical collection now. And so, yeah, just different things that caught people's eye. So there's a good sampling of the cars, because there was a section of historic automobiles that preceded the Circus Parade. So a little bit of everything.
How long did it take you to do the research to put it together?
Probably, this one wasn't that bad. There's only a few hundred items in this collection, so probably a couple of months. I actually finished it well before the July 4th anniversary date, and then I held it back and just released it at the end of June to coincide with the 60th anniversary proper. So that's when it became available online. And have since added a couple of things. Some posters were pulled from our poster collection, and we, at the time when I was scanning these initially, did not have the right equipment to be able to digitize something that big. But since that time, we have new equipment now, so we can digitize really big things in books. And so I was able to scan a couple of the posters that we have, so those are in there too, which are very colorful and very unique.
Do you know? Sorry.
Yeah.
Were you able to identify every single person in these photos, or there's somebody you're still?
Well, not every single person. Like, I was able to identify a lot of the bands. So just the ones from the 63 and 64 photos, because those are the only years that we had the description of the entire roster of people and wagons who appeared in the parade. So, I had a picture of like, okay, well, this uniform has like gold lapels and red hats. And so I, checked through the list. It's this band from, Chicago. And so I was able in the description of the photo to say, which band this was and where they came from.
Actually, Ernest Borgnine is a person that I forgot to mention. How many of you know the story about how Ernest Borgnine became a clown for the Circus Parade? Well, he was interviewed by Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show in 1969 and 1970. And Johnny Carson asked, the Oscar-winning actor, of course, he won the Oscar for Marty, and asked him, he says, is there a role that you haven't played yet that you would like to play? And he said, a clown. And Ben Barkin, watched him on The Tonight Show. And at this time, I believe The Night Show was still live on TV, and so that he was watching it at 10:30 in the evening, ran for an hour and a half at that time. And the very next day, Barton called Borgnine's, presumably his agent, and invited him to be a clown at the Circus Parade. And Borgnine said yes. And when he met the Circus World staff, he figured out, he said, well, how are we going to do the clown makeup? The one thing that Borgnine emphasized was that he didn't want to be completely obscured so that people wouldn't recognize him. He wanted people to recognize him. And he was definitely recognizable, even with the clown makeup. So that was like a light touch. And everybody knew him, and so that they could, shout out Ernie or even Marty. Because after Marty came out in 1955, he would be greeted by people and movie fans as Marty sometimes.
Do you have a picture in your?
Yes.
Yeah, if you just type in his last name, you should be able to find it in the search box. You see the search box?
It might be hidden behind.
Oh, no, it's not. Go to page 3, maybe?
Oh, there
Oh,
it
there
is.
it is. Okay. B-O-R-G. You know what I mean?
Bingo.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, that's.
Ernie and Tola. This is, I believe, the 1989 or 1990 Circus Parade. One of the few rare ones that actually was wet. And can we go to the next slide where he's trying out clown shoes?
Yeah.
This one?
Yeah, I should go to the next one.
Yeah, there he is. I have no idea what size that is, but I think that's even bigger than Bob Lanier's size 22 shoes. Can we just briefly go back to the PowerPoint? I forgot to show a few other slides that we have in the PowerPoint show. Let's go to the next one. And this is Bobby Line and his wife Lorraine. And this was actually, we don't have a photo of him in our collection. So we thank the Circus World Museum for lending us this photo of him.
Well, I would like to say, in one of the resources in the digital library, there actually is a photo of him. It's a little magazine that was released to promote the Circus World Museum. And so you'll find it in there if you search his last name in the collection. You will find that. It's a much more contemporary to the Circus Parade. Well, this is too, but yeah. It, talks about his taking over the Schlitz company and gives reasons why he sponsored the parade. So it's an interesting bit of history.
Next slide, please.
That is the end.
Oh, no, that is the end of the slideshow. If you want to see film footage of the 1963 Circus Parade, Joe, are you able to go to bring up the internet?
Yes.
Can I ask a
Oh, sure,
question?
go ahead.
Does Ernest Borgnine have any connections to Milwaukee or what? Yeah,
As far as I know, I haven't heard anything about him having, relatives or friends here, but I don't know that much about, Borgnine. He does talk about the Circus Parade in his autobiography.
because I was a medical resident in the late 86, 87, 88, yeah. And I was doing rotation at the Children's Hospital, and I'm guessing it must have been when he came for the Circus Parade, and he came to the floor and visited with the kids. Yeah. that was
Are we
pretty
talking
cool.
about the children's hospital when it was on Wisconsin Avenue or at the
Oh,
county grounds?
the old one. I was there.
On the west side?
Yeah, it's shortly before it closed, I think.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, the
so,
west side had a whole bunch of hospitals.
yeah, so there was I
Did
think
he
it was
come
just,
dressed as a clown to
I don't
entertain?
think so. I think he came just dressed as an organ. That's my memory, but again, that was a long time ago.
But at least he came.
Yeah, he came, it was really cool. So I'm guessing he must have been there for the parade and then.
Right.
entertainment.
And I actually remember, I believe it was in the 1990s at County Stadium, he attended a Brewers game. And because they showed him, presumably he was in the lower box seats, and they showed him on the big screen. And so he got a nice round of applause. And I can't remember if the Brewers won or lost that game, but he definitely, did get some applause. Can we go to YouTube? And type National Archives. And click on U.S. National Archives, the further on.
Otherwise,
This is the National Archives YouTube page. And it's a repository of federal government documents and actually a lot of our country's history, but it does include some fun stuff in there. So in the National Archives search box, I'm just trying to figure out where the search box is located.
I think if you just type Circus Parade, National Archives, Circus Parade, it'll probably
Type day in Old Milwaukee. There it is. This is a 28-minute short that surprisingly was not copyrighted. And I checked the Library of Congress's catalog of entries for 1963 and 64 under motion pictures. I couldn't find it by title, I couldn't find it by Schlitz, I couldn't find it by Barkin Herman Associates or Ben Barkin or Circus World Museum or Don Kiesler Productions. That this was something that I think it was a decision that that Eline and Barkin made, that they would not copyright it and they would just say that let it go into the public domain. So if you just simply Google, National Archives, A Day in Old Milwaukee, you can watch the 28-minute short, and it's actually hosted by Joe E. Brown, veteran Broadway, vaudeville, and movie actor. And of course, Joey Brown is probably best remembered for appearing as a sugar daddy and Some Like It Hot with Marilyn Monroe and Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon. And you remember that ending when Lemmon, he's dressed in woman's clothes, takes his wig off, and he says, "I'm not a woman," and Joey Brown simply says, "Right, right, nobody's perfect." So that's where you can watch it as well as there are countless of other Circus Parade videos that have been posted on YouTube, from different years, but this is sort of like the closest thing to an official one from the film era period of the Circus Parade. And now we'll open the floor to you, and you can share some memories before we head down and look at the display. Any questions or memories or comments?
Is there any possibility that some year the Circus Parade would ever come back?
Wouldn't that be nice?
I mean, does it just need like some massive sponsor or, one of these rich
That's-
billionaires that fly around on jets and,
Right, I mean, geez, if these, multi-billionaires can afford, spaceships and that thing, why can't they afford a few million dollars for a revival of the Circus Parade, even if it's just a one-off? Because the Circus Parade wasn't, cheap to put on.
No.
Because it was about 300 to 400,000 for the first one. And by the time of the last Schlitz Circus Parade in '73, it costed about $500,000 to $600,000. And Schlitz was pretty mum about how much it cost and how much they were spending on it. But I found a few figures. When the Circus World Museum in Ben Arkin revived it in 1985, they said that it cost approximately $700,000. And if we put it in today's dollars, it was slightly under, it cost almost $2 million. And the 2002 parade was approximately 1.4 million, and that cost about $2.5 million in today's dollars. So that gives you an idea of how much it would cost to revive the Circus Parade. And as you know, that the city and the county never really chipped in much money for the Circus Parade, because this was sponsored by philanthropist companies, and of course Schlitz saw it as a way to promote it. So because when it would air nationally on NET and its successor PBS, you would see the signs that would say Schlitz Circus Parade. And later on, when it was under the auspices of the Circus World Museum, you would see the big Circus World Museum signs. And Bob Eli, one of the reasons why he, he decided to back the Circus Parade, he said that Milwaukee needed something. He said that he was hoping that the Circus Parade would be from Milwaukee. And as Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade is for New York, and the Tournament of Roses Parade is for Pasadena and Halloween. And for decades, it was that case, because it was among the 5 biggest parades, in the country. And it was broadcasted, nationally. And it also had a footnote in the development of high definition TV. Channel 10 in 1988 taped it in experimental high definition. And they put it on a laser disc, and they sent it over to Britain for a conference on television technological developments. And the Circus Parade was PBS's first live broadcast in 2000, first live high definition broadcast in 2000. But the Journal Sentinel's TV reporter, Tim Peterson, wrote in his column that Well, there are only a few hundred high definition sets in Milwaukee, and probably only 100 of them actually have the actual antenna. So at that time, 9 years before we made the analog to digital switch in 2009, about 100 Milwaukeeans actually saw it in high definition. So that's a little, footnote. And if you have a chance to walk over to the channel 36, the channel 10 and 36 65th anniversary display in their main building, you will see signage and photos of their taking the Circus Parade over the decades.
Fairview does still have a circus parade.
Yes.
It's in June.
Right.
And over the recent few years, they've turned it into a really nice production.
Yeah, and actually, but do you have any idea of how many people they draw?
I don't. But they fairly, from what I've seen online, because I've wanted to go, and look at it every year. They've pretty much closed a whole big section of town, close the streets, and it makes a loop through the town. So they make plenty of viewing space in town for people to see it. But since they started it, which was several years ago, it's every year it's gotten to be better organized and a nicer way.
That was where Chappie Fox lives on.
Yeah.
And with Milwaukee kind of going into the spotlight recently, I mean, we're talking about National Geographic says Milwaukee as a place. I think we need to kind of bring that out again. Is like, why don't we bring back the Circus Parade? Because that would be another feather in our cap to draw people here. I think we just need to start, not really whispering, but talking about it. Because I think if we talk about it, get the word out there, I think we're gonna have people who are gonna be interested to finance it and say, let's do it again, because Milwaukee is becoming a happening place.
Yeah, that would be nice. And, and downtown can definitely hold, people because obviously when you have 750,000 people, lining the streets in downtown for the parade. And when was the last big, convergence of people in downtown? Was when the Bucks had their championship celebration 2 years ago, and that drew about 150,000 people to the Dare District. And people may think that, wow, I never seen this many people in downtown. Well, most of us have seen that many people and more, because, I've only been to the Circus Parade a couple of times during the Schlitz era and then once during its revival, but I just remember how crowded it was. That I don't think I actually saw that much of the parade, because being a child, all I saw were wigs.
And that's where people would go like a week, 2 weeks ahead of time and camp out their spaces.
Right, because my parents and I would have lunch at Big Boys at Pitt, Wisconsin, and I just remembered that the rows were only 5 deep at least, just right outside the Big Boys. And I can't remember how we managed to squeeze in and was able to catch part of it.
We were in the pre-parade. Our family had a family truck in the pre-parade, which represented the citizens coming from the circus parade grounds, the circus grounds, into the city to say that circus was coming. And when you would come around and go up the hill for the war memorial, the people there were 15 deep. It was amazing. It's a sight you'll never forget. Coming up that hill.
Right. Yeah, I'm not familiar with the pre-parade. Was that immediately before the parade, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. We were like, well, one of our pictures has a 31 on our 31 truck. And that was our position for the pre-parade. Ben Barkin would agree. Walter Wilde would work with Ben Barkin to get the antique cars and trucks and fire trucks.
We transported some of the moms a couple of years as well, and I believe Ernest Borgnine was one of the moms with us.
And our clowns came from a Kool-Aid coloring contest that was held, and we carried the winning coloring people.
Are you the one that was interviewed by Susan Betts and
Yes,
WWM? Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, and can you talk a little bit about the Kool-Aid clowns?
Well, we didn't remember much about them because my brothers and I were not, and my sister and I, we were not involved in the parade itself until after mom and dad had passed, and we decided to keep the tradition rolling. By then, there were no Kool-Aid kids, but I remember riding with dad, and there were all these kids in the back of the truck, and they were all professionally dressed as clowns. That was arranged by the Bearable Circus World, and it was just the friendliest and happiest bunch of kids you ever saw. And it was apparently some city ran or Kool-Aid ran contest here in town.
Yeah, Kool-Aid, I think, I can't remember who owned it at that time, if it was General Foods, because then General Foods was bought by Kraft, and then Kraft merged with Heinz, now it's Kraft Heinz, but they definitely saw it as a marketing tool, just as Schlitz saw it as a
Right.
way to promote, promote itself, on nationwide TV.
Well, I couldn't remember how those Kool-Aid kids happened. So I asked on a Facebook page, and there was a mom whose son had been a Kool-Aid kid. They replied and explained how the Kool-Aid kids came about.
Yeah, there was an article in either the Journal or Sentinel that talked about the Kool-Aid clowns in the late 1980s at the parade, and they were instructed to say, well, don't talk too much with parade attendees. The thing is, you just have to keep moving down the line and smile and just keep the show, moving.
Right. He was a driver.
Oh, okay. Somebody has to drive.
Oh, I was just saying about the keeping it moving. In preparation for this program, I was talking about it with one of my coworkers, and she brought up the fact that she had been in one of the marching bands in the 1980s. And her memory was that, of course, they were told it was the greatest honor. And she said it really was, but she also said the other thing was that you had to keep moving, you had to keep going, and you were not allowed to deviate for anything. So of course, there were horses going ahead of them. Lots of road apples as their flight they call. And you were not, just go right through them. She said by the end of the parade, her white shoes were not so white.
I wonder what kind of road apples the hippo left. Because that photo of the hippo, I'm just amazed that, and it's a baby hippo, admittedly, but hippos are not, the most placid animal. They can be quite vicious. Crocodiles can tell you that, because when the crocodile tries to grab a baby hippo, and if it's underwater, a hippo will just literally trample it to death. But nevertheless, I was just astounded by that photo of this hippo, traveling along Kilbourne past the First Wisconsin Bank, now the Milwaukee County Historical Society. And I'm just thinking, it's not even on a leash. I mean, just like if the hippo was spooked by something. But the newspaper article from 64 said that the hippo was reassured by the elephants that were marching in front of it. I guess it became acclimated to the elephants, and then just thinking, well, if the elephants are in front, then it must be safe. And just, walk down Kilbourne Avenue. And speaking about animals, hippos and unleashed animals, and here it is, Chappie Fox was a volunteer during the Depression in the taxidermy studio. If you come back in a couple of months, on Saturday, September 23rd, for Doors Open Milwaukee, we are going to open up some spaces in this building for behind the scenes tour. You know, every Saturday at 11 o'clock, our docents give a 1-hour tour of the 2 public floors. But we will give guided tours of one of our storage basements, where we store books, government documents, newspapers, magazines. We actually open up the dome because we have 2 domes, the dome that you see from the outside, and then when you walk in, that's actually a separate dome, so that you will actually walk in between the 2 domes. And some of you remember when the Public Museum and the Public Library shared this building for 70 years. And by 1906, both institutions said that they were running out of space, and of course additions were added on. And matter of fact, this very room that we're in is not part of the 1898 building. We are in the 1914 library addition above the first floor. And this was originally our science room. And some of the other tours that we will have are, we do have some self-guided tours. You can actually walk into the original library board of trustees room right off the rotunda. It's been restored to its 1898 appearance. And we open up one of the ghost signs of the Public Museum, the Chinese room, because the museum could not take the Chinese. They originally opened up as the Oriental room, and then when we moved the other East Asian cultures out of there to just make it only for Chinese cultural artifacts, they renamed it the Chinese room. But the 1937 WPA installed floor could not be moved out of this building without literally having it being ripped apart. And you know that today when we hear about the museum and the streets of old Milwaukee and how they're saying that some of it can't be physically moved in because it was literally built into the infrastructure of the building. So we have, a museum exhibit floor that's all tech that you can come and see Doors Open Milwaukee, September 23rd. And then we open up the museum's old offices on the 4th floor, which have remained largely the same since they moved out in the 1960s. And you will actually see signage that still clearly show its use as a museum. And then you hear about another animal. You hear this, we're talking about hippos and elephants today. Chappie Fox worked in the taxidermy studio. But Chappie came here 3 years earlier, in 1929. He would have met the public museums at Lion Cub, Sim. Sim was the personal pet of the museum director, Samuel Barrett, and his best pals at the museum were taxidermists. So he actually saw animals being taxidermied. And to find out more, come back on Saturday, September 23rd. Right.
I was actually sharing that story with a woman who was in the rotunda. She was from Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I said, and I don't think she believed me. I said, look, it's YouTube video.
Right. Right.
He's over in the museum now.
Right.
Number one expert on seeing the library lions or the museum
Right.
library.
Yeah, right. That's another thing you can look at YouTube besides the Circus Parade. If you Google Milwaukee Public Museum lion, you'll see the 4-minute home movie of Sim. The first 2 minutes, shortly after they purchased him in British East Africa, today's Tanzania. And the last 2 minutes, he's wrestling with one of his old expedition pals on the roof of this building. So that's another thing that you can watch on YouTube. And if you come back, we can tell you more about Sin, the only animal to be displayed both alive and dead in this film. Any other questions or comments or memories before we take a look at the display? Yes.
I have one more. As being part of one that also observed the parade, the best memory is watching the people go out and draw their circles on the street and waiting for the prize when they got a little dropping in there. Yeah.
It's sort of like when you go to the zoo and it's like put your penny in and it'll turn into, a copper animal. Here you'll get, a mud pie.
A mud pie in your circle, it was a big deal.
Yes, Becky.
And I was just gonna say, in line with the pennies, we used to live across the street from the railroad tracks, that's now 794. And that's where the circus train would come through.
Right, the
All
Northwest.
the kids in the neighborhood would put pennies on the tracks and get your flat penny on.
Yeah, great memories.
And then you also had all of the people that lined the railroad tracks from Baraboo all the way down,
Yes,
watching the train come by. They would put their lawn chairs out there waiting for the train to come through.
right. And it's a happy occasion because there's one night we rode the Circus Parade at least once and we talked about how happy people
We were back in 96 or 97, we were able to secure tickets from the public radio or public television, ride the circus train all the way down from there, all the way into Milwaukee. And it's really neat to see all the people in there, just lighting the streets. And when we first started, everybody was, big dignitaries were riding the truck, trying to get the governor, Thomas Thompson. And by the time we got to Madison, after Madison, then it just emptied right out. We had virtually the whole train to ourselves.
And what was the route after Madison? Did it detour down to Chicago or come to Milwaukee or?
No, we didn't.
Oh, okay. So basically from Madison.
It was
came to Milwaukee.
directly poured right in Milwaukee.
Okay. And how long did it,
That was a little day.
That was a long day.
It was- At the time,
Pretty slow.
at the time was a full, we had to be there by 7 o'clock, something like that. And then it would start, I don't remember when we would roll that, but it was a very long day.
So was it a one-way trip or?
One-way trip, we got a truck, at the time it was, Strong Management funded it,
Uh-huh.
and they took us out to all the airport, and then we rolled the train back in.
And did it stop at towns along the way for a few minutes?
A
So
little
It
bit.
stopped and there were crowds lining the train tracks the whole way. Yeah, like, and we got to Madison, all the politicians got off of the train. But then there were crowds
that,
anticipating the arrival of the train in their town.
that's another reason why we should bring back the Circus Parade, so that we can get the politicians back on the train and just to loosen up and be human again. And any other questions,
I'll
comments?
just make it quick. My father taught in Milwaukee Public Schools his whole career. So in the summer, he had different jobs. And one of his favorites, he worked for Danville Tent in Milwaukee. And they were the ones that put up the tents for all of the animals and all of the people who brought their stuff. So we would go to the Circus Parade at State Park or down at the lake where you don't have what's the, Veterans Park now.
Right.
From my point of view, it was wonderful. My brother did it, my husband ended up working with my dad. And John was saying last night that the reins, at the end, when you had to take it down, that's the hardest work. But it was a big joy for our family.
I remember in the late 90s, I was working at one of those Southside ranches and I left home early, instead of taking the expressway down, I just drove down the lakefront, and then when I went into the lower third ward, and then I actually saw them, this was after the Circus Parade, a day or two afterwards. And I detoured and I just, watched them loading the wagons back onto the cars before we returned to Fairfield.
Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, you're welcome, and thanks for coming in. Any other, questions, comments, memories? And so feel free to take the handouts and fill out the program evaluation. And then we'll go out to the hallway and you can look at the display and see some of the photos that we have and programs and a couple of posters. And once again, we have books and a DVD that you can borrow and, read and watch and to enjoy and bring back more memories.
Oh, God.